And welcome back, everybody. Flash Jones here. Got another installment here on the build series. So let's get into it. And before we get there, obviously you're gonna need your kit. You're gonna need some glue for gluing plastics, some snips, some sandpaper, and some tweezers. And with all that out the way, let's get to it. And first things first is cutting, sanding, and then gluing up the side truss assemblies. And with that, you have to glue in these interior reinforcement pieces. Now, mine were a little bit warped, so be mindful of that. So before we get into actually gluing these pieces in, I wanted to get the other side assembly to show you what these interior reinforcement pieces actually look like on the bridge. So those interior reinforcement pieces, though they're hard to see, they go right in between parts 8 and 9, which is the side truss assemblies, and you need to be able to see the rivets on both the bottom and the top. Right now you're looking at the top, it's just upside down. Those rivets need to be facing the inside of the bridge so that you can see them, because they add detail to the bridge. All right, good people, so I want to press in on, here's step one. Step one is obviously to glue the interior reinforcements 2x5, 19, and 20 to the raised interior ridges of the truss assembly, 9 and 8. Okay, the picture and the instructions do not depict this very well at all. But these chord pieces are supposed to go on the inside, the top side of this little ridge or line that's molded onto the truss assembly. As you can see there, towards the bottom end where the pointer is, that's that little ridge. When you go ahead and apply these raised, the interior reinforcements 5, 19, and 20, you want to make sure that they are on the top side of that ridge, as just per the instructions. Now, when we take a look at the chord pieces, the reinforcement pieces, you're gonna notice that it's not completely straight. It's kind of warped and it's not 100% straight. So because of that little waviness, you want to make sure that when you go ahead and apply your glue, that you make this piece as flat as you can. Also, you may be able to see there that it does have some rivets that are on one side. The other side is completely smooth and has no detail. The top side that you're kind of seeing has rivets. You want those rivets to face up so that if you were to look down at the truss assembly, you would see those rivets. So taking a quick look at these side truss frames, they're very warped, and this has been like this out of the box. I wish Walthers would have come up with a better way to make these two ends come together, kind of like how the other Pratt deck truss bridge went together. It was a much better engineering on their part for that bridge. One thing I do want to point out is you see these little notches. You have 5 notches on each of the wider side girders, if you will, on each frame. Now when you put these two pieces together, obviously 2 halves make a whole, and there's some little notch pieces that we're gonna have to put in that pretty much go right on these little ridges. Those little ridges, if you will, are just guides for where they want you to put the pins, but they're not slots or anything. All right, so when making the 2 halves whole, you want to be very mindful that when you put these pieces together, that they line up as closely as possible to being identical with one another. You want them to be lined up corner to corner, end to end. All right, good people, so moving on to step 2, we have to glue down the top and bottom chords to the truss assembly. This is one of those places where you want to stop, take your time, do it right. Okay, reason being is because the nubs that are on the top chord need to face the same side of the pins that you see right now of the truss assembly.
you absolutely do not want to fluff up this part, because if you do, your X bracing at the end of the bridge build will not affix to your bridge, and it's going to look real janky.
So right quick, I inserted a picture of the bridge mid build, right? You see the top chords, right? You see the top chords in reference to the floor beams. You notice how, again, both of the top chords on both sides of the truss assembly are facing in the inside of the bridge. They face each other. Also, down where the floor beams are, that's where those pins attach.
So taking a quick look at the finished bridge, you guys can see both the X bracing and, per the instructions, the top struts. Okay, you see where they connect to the top chord, and which is referred to as the connector plate. That's why your top chords need to be aligned correctly, to face the pins, to face the inside of the bridge. That way your top chords and your X bracing can affix to the bridge. I would imagine that if you did not go this route, you could have a completely open bridge without any X bracing and top chords, if that's the look you're going for.
But I would imagine if you do delete this portion, the X bracing and the top strut, that the integrity of the bridge may be a bit compromised. All right, good people. So moving on to step 4, got to use our locating ridges as a guide to glue the connectors onto the side assemblies that we've been building. Okay, this is what those T-pins or connectors look like on the sprue. In a moment, I'm going to show you what they kind of look like close up in my hand. But this is potentially the most finicky and most annoying part of the build. So I'm not going to show you me cutting these out, because you got to do it about 40 times, give or take. You need about 20 per side, and you got 2 sides, so a total of 40. So I'm not going to show you that, and because it's so tiny getting it in there, as you guys can see, these T-pins, I'm just going to call them T-pins because connectors is really vague. But getting these pieces in is quite finicky. As you guys can see, I'm holding that side assembly now. You see those little ridges there on the inside of the side of truss assembly? That's where these T-pins got to go. As I'm trying to keep this thing in focus for you, because it's really fighting for focus here, as you guys can see, I'm just literally putting a little bit of glue to line the inside of this cavity on the side truss assembly. I'm just lining that groove and sliding those T-pins right on in there. Okay, people, a little bit of a status update. As you guys can see, we've got pretty much all of those T-pins in. Took a good 10-15 minutes to get that. Sometimes you gotta turn and bend or turn and twist to get them to line up right, to kind of force and pry open the side girders. You don't want to be too forceful, because obviously you have everything is being supported by glue, but once you turn and bend, they usually pop right into place.
All right, moving on to the deck assembly now. We have to glue these floor beams into the openings on the stringers. Now keep in mind, you have two different part numbers. You have like parts 2 and 3. This step is part 2. Okay, part 2, you can kind of see there, it has a little bit more styrene plastic attached to it. These are the pieces that affix in the middle of the deck assembly that connect to the pins that we were talking about earlier when we were talking about the top chords and the connector plates. These middle pieces attach in those pinholes to connect the deck assembly to the side truss assembly. You have to make sure that you use the right parts, because at the once we get to the end of the deck assembly portion, you're going to see that there's another piece that you guys can see at kind of the top of the screen there that doesn't have the extra styrene. Those are part 3. Those go on the extreme ends of the platform or the deck, not the middle. All right, still on the deck, moving on to step 2 now. Very similar to step 1, but now we're talking about the end pieces, the end floor beams, right? They have to attach to the end of the stringers. This is part number 3. Take special note in noticing that the side that these rivets are on, you have a side that has raised rivets and a side that has smoother rivets, right? Now, the side that has the raised rivets slide onto the end of the end platform, as you can see me doing now. They just slide on. You got to add some glue, and you're gonna have to do something to keep pressure so that it adheres. But the end that has these smoother rivets, that's the outside. That's the part that you would see if you're looking at the face of your bridge. All right, moving on to step 3, still on the deck. Got to cut off and glue in these stringer lateral zigzag pieces into the inside cavity of the floor beams, right? As you guys can kind of see what these look like, it's kind of a tedious process, but you got to get them cut off the sprue and get them pushed in. I didn't sand these down because there was really no need to. The flush or the filings, it has no bearing on the end product, but it's a bit tedious. And again, the infamy of Walthers instructions reigns yet again. It's not clear on where the exact location of these zigzaggers are supposed to go. So as you guys can see, mine is upside down, my deck assembly, and I'm putting my zigzags towards the top. I know even it looks like the bottom is actually towards the top because my deck assembly is upside down. It makes no difference where you put it. This is where I decided to put mine. I like the way it looks here. But whatever you guys decide to do with your models, what you decide to do. Putting this glue down, I'm just kind of lifting up the points of contact and dropping a little bead of glue right where it's making contact with the floor assembly, and I just keep it pushing that way. All right, so moving on to step 4 on the deck. We have to glue down these floor beam cover plates that cover up the floor beams and the vertical stringers that run the length of the deck. Just a detail part that it looks like to me, it's got some rivets on it. On one side, you will see that it's kind of grooved, and it's kind of like alignment grooves that will have gaps in it for the vertical and horizontal to kind of create like a T or cross shape. That way, the portion of it that you see the rivets, that is the portion that needs to face down, if you will. Looking at it in this setup, how I'm gluing down the floor beam covers, you can see the rivets. But obviously, when you affix the floor beams and the deck assembly to your side truss assemblies, that's going to actually be facing down towards the bottom of your layout, if you will. All right, people, so moving on here to step 5. Step 5 on the deck is this part number 7, otherwise known as your X bracing, that has to go on the bottom of your deck assembly. This is one of those areas on the instructions by Walthers here that is not really that clear. So walk with me on this. When you go in to affix your X bracings on the bottom of your truss assembly, you really want to make sure that it's centered properly on your deck, right? You want the center of your X literally to be in the center of each gap in your deck assembly, where the gaps are between your floor beams running the length of deck. Okay, reason being is the X bracings have some play to them, and they can really get out of whack and out of position. So I'm saying this, and I'm going to try to show it in such a way that you guys can kind of get a real feel for what I'm talking about. But if you fluff up this part, the center of your X will be closer to the main 1 or the main 2 side of the track, if that makes sense, and it'll cause the alignment just look a little off. Will it be noticed? Absolutely not, but you'll know. We'll know as the modeler. And if some of us are perfectionists, sometimes I can be. This is one of those things that bother me because I ended up doing this exact same thing. So while you're going through on your X bracings, this is one of those points where you're going to want to stop, take your time, and do it right. Okay, so looking here at the instructions, you can see I've kind of highlighted this part number 7. Okay, looking at part 7, you see where there's a little bit of a gap in the center of where the X bracings come together, because it's 2 halves molded to make one long piece, but it's cut in 2. When you go ahead and affix the X bracing, you want to just try to have it balanced so that on each end, on the main 1 side and the main 2 side of the bridge, there's enough of the material of the X bracings on both sides. All right, so piggybacking right off that, we got to roll into the final assembly. We're going to skip over step 1, because step 1 is just talking about your bridge track. We're going to go right into step 2. Step 2 is you have to take all the work that you've done and begin to actually make the bridge look like a train track bridge. So side note, going back just a little bit here, take a look at those X bracing and those little end plate pads there. You see how looking down towards this end of the bridge is not even. This is exactly what I was talking about. It's not 100% even. It's not completely symmetrical. Okay, back to the game.
Okay, so you got to take your side truss assemblies and your deck and put them together. If you remember back in the beginning of the video or earlier in the video, we were talking about the pins on the sides of the floor beams and the little pinholes that are on the sides of the truss assembly, and then your top chords and your all that good stuff. This is where all of that comes to a head and you begin to make your double track modernized bridge come to life, right? So essentially, take your time here. Don't fluff this up either. Get those pins lined up and do not force them on. I never had to force mine on, but you just have to get them lined up right and in order to ensure that you didn't snap those pins, because those pins are kind of like guides. So just be careful, be easy. It is plastic, it is styrene, and you don't want to shear them off. All right, so now, as you guys can see, we're rolling into step 3. We have to cut out the end portals and your top struts. I wanted to kind of break this down and kind of really show you this part, because the next portion you kind of can't see me gluing it in. So I figured I'd show you guys at least this part. I'm obviously going with the modern diesel era and not the steam era, because you get both options on your sprue within the kit. These are what the diesel ones look like. I didn't show the steam because I'm not doing steam. But I'm showing you how I'm cutting these off, because in some of these areas you guys can see there's just a little bit of a pin that's on the ends of the struts and where it kind of connects to the sprue. There's a little bit like extra flash. I'm not sure if they did that on purpose or if that was done accidentally, but I'm going to use that to my advantage. As I'm going to show you here in a moment, as you guys see, this piece is the end portal. You obviously do not want to cut off the flat area on the very ends, because they connect, as you guys can see here, to the bridge itself. That's your point of contact for your glue, which is what I'm doing here. In a moment, you're going to see here on the bridge, on the truss assemblies, these little notches in the areas on your top chords that we were talking about way earlier in the video, like 10-15 minutes ago. This little notch here that you see, that's where the little pins on your top struts kind of plug into, and then the top of the top struts fits in between those two little dots on the bottom side of the top chord. You want to obviously get everything lined up correctly, that way that your top struts fit in there and they're aligned correctly and that they're not loose. Now I got the bridge upside down, just kind of give you a more of a close-up look at the top chord and what it looks like with one of the top struts glued in there and put in place. You guys can see the top strut just goes right in between the two little dots. Those two dots are kind of like guides, and then the end of the bottom portion of the top strut kind of plugs right into the little notches that are on the side truss assemblies. All right, keeping with that same energy about the top struts and the top chords, I'm going to slide off into a tangent here and talk about the X bracing. As you guys can see, you have two sides to your X bracing. One side has a rivet detail and one side is smooth. You want your rivet detail to be visible to you when you look at the bridge from the outside, right? In addition to that, I wanted to point out that I am kind of commingling the steps just a touch, because by adding in the top struts, once you get the top struts in there, it's going to be really sketchy trying to get your hands down inside the bridge to put the X bracings in there. Now the X bracing pieces are very flexible, so you know you don't have to be paranoid about snapping them, but you are going to have to be mindful of bumping into your top struts, and if you bump the top struts, you will dislodge them and possibly knock them out of alignment. So you want to be mindful of that. So it may be kind of wise to alternate and go one top strut, an X bracing, top strut, X bracing for the length of the bridge. That way you don't bump into things. All right, folks, and that is that. This is the Walthers CornerStone Modernized Double Track Truss Bridge. I hope you guys did enjoy this installment on the build series. Speaking of the build series, this bridge is 10 out of 11. And if you haven't seen the other 3 bridges that came before this one, please check those out. The 70-foot, the 90-foot through deck girder bridges, and the 109-foot Pratt deck truss bridge. Feel free to check those out. There should be a little poker top right corner for each one of those videos. And of course, since you guys made it this far,
feel free to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and also feel free to follow me over there at Instagram at FlashJonesTrains. And until next time, everybody, be blessed, stay safe, and until next time, keep it on the rails. All right, Flash Jones, enjoy the B-roll and a little sneak peek of the arched Pratt Truss Bridge, which will be the next installment on the build series. I'm out. Peace.
Mission accomplished.